Today's session is part of our Spark Live series, a highly curated interactive series of events designed to keep your organization current on the stories, trends, and tools that matter today that we know will transform our tomorrow. The Spark Live series is intended to bring you original content, unexpected insights, new connections, and anything you need to bring back and spark ideas in your organization. Normal housekeeping notes, please keep yourself muted, but feel free to turn on your camera. It helps keep this session more lively and interactive, and we'd love to see your faces and say hi face to face. Today's session is with Mike Grandinetti. Mike has a uniquely multidisciplinary career. Let me just move over to his slide. There we go. Mike has a uniquely multidisciplinary career. He is a successful serial tech entrepreneur with 2 NASDAQ IPOs and 7 exits. He is also an award-winning faculty member at Harvard, Brown, Berkeley, and Rutgers, and an industry fellow with Babson Exec Ed, teaching courses on AI and machine learning, entrepreneurship, innovation, creativity, and design. Mike has been published in HBR Italy, California Management Review, Wharton at Work, and Forbes under his byline. Formerly with McKinsey, he's now an AI innovation and design consultant whose clients include Microsoft, IBM, Samsung, Capital One, and Stellantis. He's led 200+ design sprints and hackathons globally. Mike, it is a pleasure to have you here. Very much looking forward to this session, and the floor is yours.
Nia, thank you so much for that lovely, warm introduction. Appreciate it. I'm going to share my screen now. If you would just clear the screen, I'll go with my screen, my slide deck. Beautiful. Excellent. All right. So I want to welcome everyone. I happen to be in Boston, Massachusetts today, where I am speaking from. And I want to welcome all of you to this Spark Live event. I don't know if any of us had a chance to meet in Miami at the incredible Singularity Bootcamp that happened in September. Quite a community of people came out of that, that event, and the group chat continues to be as lively as anything I've ever seen. So it tells me so much about the kind of people that are on this call, hungry to learn. So we're going to talk about something that is certainly very relevant in the world of exponential organizations as we've transformed into a digital world, right? And that is, we're starting to see an extremely powerful revolution underway in the field of software development. And that has been brought on by the transformative power of generative AI, right? Over the 75 years that people have been programming in higher level languages, the holy grail has always been to deliver higher quality code and to make developers more productive and more efficient. And it's been a long journey, okay? And so now I'm going to go full screen. And what I tend to do in the way I present is I want to get right to the punchline. I don't want to save the punchline for the end. So these are the things that I'm going to ask you to think about taking away with you, okay? I don't think I have to tell a crowd of people affiliated with Singularity that we have full stop entered the age of generative AI. And the questions that keep coming up is, what are the use cases? And the words of Peter Diamandis, they are abundant, right? The number of use cases that are accessible through generative AI appear to be limitless. And through a lot of my courses and workshops, right, I'm working with many companies in many industries across many functions. And there's been a lot of high impact use cases that have been identified. They're in use and they're having quite an impact. But there is no question that it is a game changer in the world of software development. If you look at McKinsey data, and I will be sharing some McKinsey data with you throughout this presentation, they've identified software development as one of the 3 most universally high impact use cases across all industries. We have seen many seminal moments in the software development journey. I won't read those out, but these have all been significant and sort of inflection points in terms of productivity and quality. And we've seen many killer apps in this world evolve. And I'm going to share this data with you in literally the next slide, but we're seeing huge gains in productivity and efficiency through automation. improve code quality, enhance creativity, and job satisfaction. And it's important to understand that these tools are not anywhere near ready to replace developers, although they are extremely important as co-pilots. And so if you are leading a development team, it's very important to start to put in place strategy, plans, and tools for developers. So let's go right to the impact. This graphic comes from McKinsey, as will the next one. And this is a very significant finding. And what they're doing is they're comparing a variety of different tasks. When someone is using a generative AI tool like GitHub Copilot to task completion without the use of generative AI. We all know that documentation is one of the things that developers like to do the least. They're very tedious. Good news for them is you can literally get code or documentation done 50% quicker with Gen AI. You can generate code 35 to 45% more quickly. You can refactor code. Now, refactoring code means that you basically organize it. You make it much more efficient, much more compact. And you can literally do code refactoring. You can reduce the time of this very significantly complex exercise by 20 to 30%. But not surprising for those very high level, high complexity tasks that require very senior level, very experienced and very talented programming. The reduction in time is only 10%. Okay. Now, what's really interesting, right? We all know how heavily certain industries have felt gaps in their ability to hire and retrain developers. And we all know the incredible competition for talent and how a handful of companies in the Valley, right? The Magnificent Seven or the FANG stocks or whatever we call them, right, are sitting on hundreds of billions of dollars of cash, and they're able to pay very, very high salaries, which make a lot of the best developers out of reach. And so what we're seeing here for any company is that there's a line here between whether a developer is feeling negative or positive. And what you're seeing across all three of these dimensions is developers using generative AI felt much happier in their work, significantly happier. They felt like they could satisfy, they had a much more satisfying and meaningful work experience. And they were in this wonderful flow state, right? They were in the zone. They felt like they were, really able to tap those keys and sort of be at one with the computer, right? So this is powerful. It's very powerful. And now we're going to figure out how we got here, okay? So what I want to now do is in 2 slides, just to provide a little bit of context, a very brief history of coding. I want to talk about the great Mark Andreessen's prophetic blog of 2011, where software is eating the world and how that has happened. As a result, the persistent talent gap that has really come out of the fact that every industry requires software developers. And then enter from stage left, generative AI copilots. And talking about how they are transforming the entire development process, not just coding, but every part of the process. And then share some additional statistics that I think reinforce and are consistent with the McKinsey statistics I just shared. And then for people that are leading and managing developers, what next generation developers need to be successful and where they might come from. So, obviously coders have been at work, and the question might be, how long has this really been something that has been a profession? Well, beginning in 1949, 75 years ago, right, we've seen a wide number of milestones emerge, each one of which was a very significant upgrade, advance in the world of generative AI. Okay, and I'm sorry, in the world of software development. And each one of these really helped to make programmers much more effective. Okay, now it turns out software development is a relatively new career choice, right? It became a college major and a career really beginning in the 1960s. So MIT established its computer science degree in 1966. Carnegie Mellon did in 1965. Caltech started working on it within 1969, Stanford 64. So we see quite a pattern here. Within a very short period of time, this became something that was a legitimate career path that had not existed before. Okay. So I'm sure a lot of you know this blog, but I want to remind you that, this was something, and of course, Andreessen is certainly a techno-optimist. Some of you may have seen his most recent manifesto on artificial intelligence. But in August 2011, he shared his insights in a post called Why Software is Eating the World. And he went on to say more and more industries are being run on software. And he expects many more industries to be disrupted by software. And of course, he called out the winners of Silicon Valley. Now, how did that play out? Pretty damn well. It played out exactly the way that Andreessen predicted it would. If you look at both 2006 and 2011, the vast number of companies that were the top 5 in publicly traded market cap were oil companies, conglomerates, and banks. But from 2011 to just 5 years later in 2016, we see some names that everybody on this webinar will recognize. These are the mega cap stocks. Every one of these companies has hit at least $1 trillion in market cap. So Andreessen got it right. Now, the question is, what are the implications of him getting it right? And we have seen over a long period of time a very persistent talent gap that has been estimated by many organizations, including the U.S. Bureau of Labor, LinkedIn Workforce Reports, the U.S., the IEEE, the Association for Computing Machinery, roughly 1 million short. And at least 3/4 of all tech companies have reported talent gaps. Okay. And of course, it's really interesting because in the US, in this upper left-hand side, we see that we're graduating 344,000 people. 258,000 people with STEM degrees, but we need 350,000 to fill the gap, right? So we're seeing a compounded effect. And because development is so challenging, computer science is only the 12th most popular major, even though so many people advise the next generation learn coding. It's a incredibly, durable, resilient career that's not going to go away. And also in the lower right, women.
One moment.
Women who comprise more than 50% of,
Still on it.
university graduates, are only comprising
Sorry,
about 24.
Trouble with the connection. Please try again in a moment.
Guys, is that you? It's not me. Coming through? Okay. Anyway, women only comprise 24% or about half of their level in more general studies. So you've obviously had a lot of different reasons why we've been experiencing this gap. And it's been very, very difficult for companies to address. And so now, all of a sudden, this moment of generative AI appears on the scene. Now, what's really interesting is that when the researchers at OpenAI were working on the LLM known as 3.5, a gentleman by the name of Mario Amade, here in the upper left, in 2019, just for kicks, said, I'm working on a program. I'm going to just see if 3.5 has any ability to complete some of the code. And to his absolute shock, it did. Not only did it do it, it did it using methodologies that he himself would not have used. And he is now the CEO of Anthropic. He's one of the most respected guys in the Valley in the world of AI. And so what's remarkable is that this LLM, known as GPT 3.5, did something that even the researchers at OpenAI had no idea was possible. He very quickly alerted his boss, OpenAI CTO Murati. Mura was already working very closely with the guy in the lower right, Kevin Scott, the CTO of Microsoft. And they had one of those moments was, oh my God, we need to figure out how to commercialize this. And so fortunately, Alex Friedman, who had been the CEO of GitHub before they were acquired by Microsoft just a year before, said, my God, this sounds like just an opportunity that we can't pass up. So in a very short period of time, Microsoft and OpenAI decided they were going to begin to validate this LLM, beginning with a copilot specifically for software development. Now, I use the word copilot only because that was a very deliberate process. So there were a lot of different phrases, branding names that were suggested, including automated pair programmer, coding autopilot. But it turns out that Friedman is a licensed airplane pilot. And so he has a very clear understanding of the complementary role that both pilots and co-pilots play when managing a flight. So he actually was the one that suggested that co-pilot most accurately represented the division of labor between the developer and the LLM. And so there is no question, there's a lot of value. You draw on billions and billions of lines of publicly available code. And so you're able to suss out industry best practices that are suggested from all of these different generative AI tools. It allows developers to code at much higher levels of abstraction than they ever could, often in natural language and plain spoken English. And then Copilot is able to see patterns, and it's able to generate code snippets, blocks of code, entire programs. And it also automates many repetitive tasks. And it can actually raise a red flag and say, this is a common mistake. Or it can safeguard against, potentially putting holes in the code that are going to lead to security vulnerabilities. And by freeing up time, it gives people the ability to have more creative brain space for their, for thinking architecturally. And so it's not just in the process of writing code. It works all the way downstream. You can automate testing by generating unit tests automatically. You can detect bugs. You can figure out the root cause analysis of how come those bugs happened. And it actually suggests fixes. It automates the documentation process, as we saw in the McKinsey data. It provides for a lot more collaboration, facilitating a higher level of teamwork, both in code development and debugging. And it serves as a learning and development mentor as well. Okay. And so knowing all this, Microsoft decided it would go through with a phased, controlled launch of the GitHub Copilot. So when they did this, they started in October 21, and they released it as a NeoVim plugin in a public repository, because NeoVim is a highly configurable text editor where you can program in almost any language. So it was extremely popular, really great path to the development community. A short term later, they released it as a plugin on JetBrains, which is the leading integrated development environment for Java. And then waiting a few months longer, in March 2022, they announced it for Microsoft Visual Studios. And then only after, many months of validation did they actually go into what we would call general availability. They moved it out of technology or technical preview. Once they did that, they began to really go out. Here's Nat Friedman at a Gen AI conference. In the middle, Inbal Shani, who runs product at GitHub, right? The word got out. And boy, did it get out, right? So I don't know how many of you know Andre Karpathy. He's been in the news the last couple of days. Again, PhD out of Stanford, Google DeepMind, the greatest, AI research lab on the planet, ran deep learning at Tesla, and now he's at OpenAI. And he made a comment that was heard around the world. GitHub Copilot's writing 80% of my code with 80% accuracy. And then I'm very actively involved in the MIT Sloan CIO Symposium. We heard people from the stage, including Shamin Mohammed, who's both CIO and CTO of CarMax, singing the praises of GitHub Copilot with his own, IT team. and sharing a lot of data, very consistent with what we've seen so far. And as a result of all of that, in a year, Microsoft had a real business on its hand. Okay. So you could get GitHub for free, but if you added Copilot, you were required to pay $10 a month for the benefit of the service. Within 1 year, $100 million in revenues were being generated, and they now have 1.5 million users on the platform. Okay, remarkable. It's a real business. Okay, now I'm going to go back to some additional McKinsey data. And so what McKinsey identified here is that in the upper right-hand quadrant, right, which is kind of the payoff place, right, the impact of Gen AI as a percentage of functional spend on the horizontal, and the impact of generative AI on the left as an impact on the function itself. And what we see is that software engineering, both for corporate IT and software engineering for product development, are without question the most impactful use cases for the use of generative AI. Now, they're obviously very important in customer operations as well, and they're very important in sales and marketing, but they are uniquely important in the world of software development. Further, what McKinsey tries to show in this graphic, and I'll try to unpack this very quickly, they're looking at the productivity on business functions across every industry: high-tech, banking, pharma, telecom, healthcare, media, advanced manufacturing. And what they're able to say is across every single function, using color coding, the darker the blue, the higher the impact. Marketing and sales, high impact universally across the board. Software engineering, high impact across all industries, with an incredibly dark blue rectangle inside the tech industry. Okay, so this is not something that is only limited to the tech industry. Certainly the tech industry will benefit because they're writing software all day, every day. But every company today is a digital company, and every company today will benefit dramatically from the use of Gen AI as part of the coding process. Okay, so now let's talk about how it's transforming each and every part of the process. So first of all, there has been an explosion of tools from both upstarts and incumbents. And this is really, as if anything, just for people's reference, for those who are going to take this back to the workspace and start to think about how you might start retooling your team. So, of course, we all know ChatGPT, and we all know GitHub, but Mutable AI, Tab9, Duet AI are all apps that have emerged as significant apps outside the world of GitHub Copilot. And then, of course, on the right, we have all of the incumbents. AlphaCode is a very unique contribution from DeepMind that I will explain a little bit later. But Bard today is able to do the same thing as GitHub Copilot and ChatGPT. Amazon has their own Code Guru. All of the major cloud platforms have the ability to help turbocharge development within their environments as well. Okay, so these are basically everywhere at this point. Okay, and then debugging. What a frustrating experience it is to debug code. Make your eyes cross. Okay, and these are some of the benefits that Gen AI delivers against traditional tools without AI. You can automate bug detection and resolution, right? You can literally identify and rank the bugs by severity and impact in the code base, right? And you can speed up the debugging process. You can proactively predict whether potential bugs or failures in future iterations of a product will actually happen even before you reach testing stage. It will help you identify anomalies, and it will suggest ways to mitigate those anomalies. It enhances test coverage, right? Because it's automating, and it now can process in a way that you could never do it before. So it reduces debugging time. And then when you're doing code integration or development decisions, it's providing predictive analytics to tell you what you're in store for if you make the following decisions. Okay. So one of the research projects is a project coming out of Microsoft. It's called Deep debug. And what it basically does is it detects and fixes bugs both in Java that have been mined from real-world GitHub depositories. It also does the same with Python bugs, and it's adaptable to pretty much any language, okay? And what I'm going to share with you later, I guess I might as well share with you now, we're seeing debug times literally decrease by up to 77x, okay? So they have really cracked the code when it comes to debugging, okay? And this is kind of just a very quick screen grab of what it looks like. On the right-hand side, you've got buggy code that identifies sort of a single phrase within the code, able to say, okay, we identified it, and oh, by the way, we fixed it for you. You don't have to worry about it. It's already been fixed, okay? Documentation, removing the tedium of documentation. We've got a wide range of different tools that have emerged on the left from a variety of different upstarts. And so what they're basically able to do is they're able to automatically document the code using the very popular Markdown format. And they're able to do this in a way where the code and the documentation is treated as coupled. So when you update the code, it automatically updates the documentation simultaneously, okay? Which is amazing because we always know how far behind documentation is relative to the code base, okay? Sometimes multiple generations of code behind. And so now you're literally able to have this just kind of keep pace in real time, okay? And there's one product particularly that has gotten a tremendous amount of attention, which is a company called Swim AI, right? And it's a knowledge management and documentation platform. And this probably more than any other has captured the attention of sort of the leading development community, okay? I'm not going to spend a lot of time belaboring the slide because I want to keep us on track, but I think it's something that anyone who's responsible for documentation should take a good hard look at, okay? And then code refactoring. Why do we refactor code? We want to make it more readable, right? We've all heard about spaghetti code. We want to reduce the complexity of the code. We want to improve its maintainability, and its extensibility, its performance. And so code refactoring is something that is also being transformed. And here are a number of providers on the left: Sorcery, Deep Decode, Mutable AI, IntelliJ Bot, and Code Climate, and Reshaper. They're all AI-driven refactoring code tools that can reduce refactoring times significantly. And I'll share some data from some studies as we get a little further along, okay? And you now actually have the ability to have AI-based sprint reporting. So you're able to both integrate with Jira's bug tracking and agile project management platforms, and with Linear's project management and issue tracking tools. And so it is keeping track of all project activities, decisions, and key updates simultaneously. So you're actually seeing, as code is being developed, you're seeing that these tools are being updated automatically. So if you're a Jira shop or a Linear shop, these tools have been integrated to work seamlessly together, okay? And so let's look at some additional numbers, right? Just a reminder, we looked at these charts before, okay? And now I want to show you some data from some other organizations. So this one comes from GitHub themselves. They've now got 37,000 organizations using Copilot today with 1.5 million developers. Very consistent with McKinsey data. They're seeing 55% faster coding. Code reviews are happening, 15% faster. And darn near 100% of developers are happier when using Copilot, which makes a lot of sense, right? When something is reducing stress, removing tedium, it's going to make your life a lot better. Okay, Stack Overflow, a large coding community, ran a study in 2021. They did not report any numbers, but they also reported that developers are far happier because of the fact that they can focus on creative problem solving, which is why most people got into the field of software development to begin with. Okay, Berkeley did a study in 2021. Copilot generated 63 test functions correctly across multiple languages, including some of the major languages like Python and JavaScript. And it enabled developers to complete tasks 29% faster. Now, let's remember, this is going back to 2021. So this is relatively, this is ancient history, but this was something that was already being recognized as far back as 2021, okay? And then deep debug. It's able to detect almost 70% of all bugs in a recent study, okay? And it cuts the debugging time from 11 hours to 15 minutes. So you can, if that's not an exponential impact, I don't know what is, right? That's just remarkable, okay? So now where do we go from here? So let's be clear. These are co-pilots. And as Imbal Shani, who runs product at GitHub, says, right, the fact that people expect it to replace humans today is premature. It absolutely is a collaboration between humans and AI. Now, she also goes on to talk about where we go from here, which is in 3 to 5 years, developers will evolve to think more about connected systems and architecture versus coding. And junior developers will be able to focus on this really as a mentor, right? From learning and development point of view, to assist with coding. Now, just yesterday, I was listening to the Big Tech podcast. And I can't remember the name of the partner from Union Square Ventures who was on the podcast. Brilliant guy, MIT PhD. And, he went on to talk about the fact that, we're going to see a very interesting dynamic happen in the world of software development and salaries. They're already starting to see the impact in their own portfolio companies of a reduction in salaries of some of the more junior level developers, because a lot of the basic stuff is now being able to be done by these AI tools. But at the same time, you're going to see developers that are going to really, almost like a professional athlete, right, just take every tool they can to perform at their absolute best, right, to be fully realized. And so you're going to see some developers that are going to kind of move into a newer, higher salary range because they're going to be the superstars of coding. Okay, so I think VCs are already starting to see the impact of this play out within their portfolio companies today. Okay. Matthew Candy was quoted very recently, just a couple of weeks ago in Forbes. He runs all generative AI consulting for IBM. And he is encouraging developers to become more human. And so he said the speed at which people can come up with an idea, to test the idea, to make something, it's going to be so accelerated. You don't need a CS degree to do that, right? The Copilot is going to help you with that. So he's recommending, and I do hope that this comes true, and we're going to start to see this more within computer science degree programs, soft skills like questioning, creativity, and innovation are going to become increasingly important because AI will free up a lot more time for a creative thought process. And so you need to be there to be able to participate in that creative thought process, right? You don't want automatons, right? You want people that really can think in big, broad strokes. That's where competitive advantage comes from, right? I know I teach a course on creativity, and creativity is really the front end of innovation. The ability to reframe problems, to reinvent completely new solutions that no one had considered. Those are the kinds of companies that are innovation leaders. And so if you've got developers that are able to more actively participate in that process and not have to wait for product owners to tell them what to do, but to be another very powerful voice at the table, I think that has very important connotations for the world ahead. Okay. And so I don't know how many of you have heard of the phrase of a new collar job. It's gotten quite a bit of currency. IBM can be credited with certainly having some impact on introducing this notion. And of course, a lot of this was born out of the frustration of what we know was this huge talent gap. And so the message has been, and we've seen this kind of, cascade throughout Silicon Valley. You don't need a 4-year degree, right? There are jobs like cloud computing technicians, cybersecurity analysts, and a variety of other IT roles that you can now enter into without having to say that you have a Bachelor of Science in technology or computer science. And so I think the trend is already beginning to play out. LinkedIn now has about 15% of its users online on the platform without 4-year degrees. So you're starting to see this actually go mainstream today. Okay. And so how do these new collar jobs of the future happen? They could certainly happen by STEM learning in a high school, internships and workplace skills. Certainly business mentorship is important. And first in line for the real actual full-time jobs that happen, right? And for some, it could be a pathway to college and a pathway to new careers. Although I can tell you that I've done a lot of work with community colleges where a lot of the people graduating with 2-year degrees, they're very happy with the career paths that those 2-year degrees provide them. And they still have very meaningful careers ahead of them. So not everybody aspires to a 4-year career. Now, community colleges, of course, are very powerful places to learn some of these skills. And more we've seen boot camps and online certifications that have happened as well. Now, here is a very interesting event. I don't know how many of you remember this going back about 9 months or so, but the Arizona State University plus GS Ventures event occurs every year in Arizona, and it is an education industry focused summit. And they draw some very, very powerful speakers. One of the speakers was Chris Karen, who was the CEO of Turnitin. Anybody who teaches probably knows Turnitin. It is a web crawler that does an extraordinary job of looking for plagiarism, highly effective. And it's been around a while. It was founded in 1998 in Oakland, California. So this is a company that's got a lot of maturity. And Karen comes out at the event and says, most of our employees are engineers. We have a few hundred of them. I think in 18 months, which is only about 12 months from now, we're only going to need 20% of them. We're going to start hiring them right out of high school rather than 4-year colleges. Now, the audience members audibly gasped. Okay. Now, I think that he took this a bit far. I think that he was being, I don't know if we could say naively optimistic. I mean, on the one hand, he knows his company. He's been running it for 25 years. On the other hand, it seems implausible to me that you could transition that quickly. But it does beg the question, what is the future of coding as a career choice? And who are the developers that are going to lean in hard to the use of Gen AI to make themselves super programmers? And who are the ones that are not going to, invest time? Now, I want to share a special case of generative AI in coding, and this is AlphaCode. And here you see Sundar on stage fairly recently introducing AlphaCode 2 based on Gemini. And so what AlphaCode 2 has been designed to do is to excel in competitive programming challenges. So a programming challenge like Top Coder or one run by Codeforce. So it is not a direct substitute for GitHub Copilot. But of course, this is coming from DeepMind. DeepMind are the people that allowed us to, go off and create this thing called AlphaGo that beat the world's greatest Go player. DeepMind is extraordinary. And so right now, it's capable of coding in some of the more popular languages. And what you do here is a bit different. You literally, in natural language, say, this is a hugely challenging issue that we have not been able to mitigate. And in that response, it generates thousands. And by the way, you're doing it in natural language, in English. And it's coming back and it's generating thousands of proposed solutions to that specific problem. It's then filtering out the ones that are considered invalid. It clusters the remaining ones into groups and then selects a single example from each group to submit back to the developer. Okay. And it performed better than 85% of competitors in these challenges on average. Okay. So this tells you where we're heading. Okay, as much as anything I think I've shared with you, this is the kind of capability that we can expect to see. Now, what you may not know is that this is how quickly, in just a year and a half, we went from being able to outperform 50% to 85%. Just imagine what AlphaCode 3 is going to be able to deliver. Okay. So I don't want to sound like I'm working for the Chamber of Commerce of Generative AI Copilots, although I can understand how people might believe that. And I think it's important to understand that in any use of generative AI, there's always going to be risks and limitations. I'm old enough to remember a time when I went through engineering school where we could not use a calculator. Okay. And so, of course, you had to learn your math the hard way. And so the real question becomes, will the use of AI tools make developers lazy? Will it discourage them from exploring innovative solutions? Will it explore them from really leaning into their work? Or will they just become overly reliant on it the way so many of us have become overly reliant on Google Maps and have lost our sense of direction? Okay. And it's not error-free, right? No one is claiming that it's perfect. So developers still need to, a human in the loop is required. You still need to carefully review AI-generated code, AI-generated suggestions before you put your name on that program and submit it to GA. Okay. And so where are we heading from here as I start to conclude? There's no question that as we saw with AlphaCode 2, the advancements are going to promise more and more sophisticated code completion tools. And I can't imagine any person running a development team today that has not embraced this technology. If they haven't, today would be a very good day to start because you're already 2 years behind. Okay. And so I'm going to remind you of a few things. This is without peer, one of 3 universally impactful cross-industry use cases. The productivity gains across every single phase of the development process are very visible and they're very real. And although the tools are not going to replace developers today, they're going to make developers really bifurcate into those who are just doing low-level coding and those who are the super architects and the super programmers of the future that every organization wants. And so today is the day. If you've been saying, yeah, I'm going to wait and see how it plays out, today would be a good day to start thinking very seriously about the use of Gen AI inside of your own development organization.